This week, Clayton Fields from Javelin Networks joins us for our sponsor interview to discuss the importance of Active Directory security and identifying patient zero. In the news, Michael Santarcangelo makes an in-studio appearance to discuss hybrid cloud security, fraud detection, embracing automation with empathy, securing CCTV, why visibility is so important, but more importantly, what is it? Microsoft also makes some recommendations on how to secure Office 365. All that and more on this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. The teleprompter now has artificial intelligence, Doug, and updates itself. It's awesome. This week, and talk about them as it relates to enterprise security. You're gonna do great.
I think that people think that you and I talk like every day at night. You know, It's like, hey, what are you doing? It's kind of a bit of an exhausting week, and I think that we noticed that a little bit in the stories for this week as well.
Minerva Labs stops malware that traditional antivirus solutions cannot block. Minerva works with your existing anti-malware tools to stop evasive threats by deceiving them into a dormant state, dramatically increasing your rate of prevention. Minerva's solution does not require ongoing care and feeding and will not get in the way of business users. With Minerva, adversaries have to pick their poison, implement evasive tactics and get caught by Minerva, or don't employ evasion and get stopped by AV. To learn more and request a demo, visit minerva-labs.com today. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian. It is, in fact, Wednesday, January 17th, 2018. We're broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios, where the new sets are taking shape, and we're almost ready to complete a pretty big phase in our sets, and I'm excited about that. So I have with me here in studio, making a visit to the studios this week, Mr. Michael Santarcangelo, the sand hobo himself.
Yeah,
there's no
it's
sand.
Snowing.
There's no sand here.
Yeah, I'm not a snow hobo. Sand.
There is some snow outside.
There is snow. Yeah. It's because I'm here, isn't it? You guys custom ordered snow for me. I appreciate that.
We did.
Nope. Don't
we wanted you to experience New England.
Yeah. No, I grew up in the New England area. I mean, I get it.
That's right.
That's why I
got my Dunkin' Donuts.
I like that. It's nice. You got your Patriots. I appreciate you not rubbing that in my face.
I did.
Today.
You know, I did. I had a Patriots hat and sweatshirt, but it was a little warm here in the studio, so I was more comfortable in just the T-shirt. So I'll spare everyone.
It was a little warm. It is.
You
a little
can still
warm.
hate me because you know I'm a Patriots fan. So don't stop hating me for being a Patriots fan, please. That's my only request.
I got nothing but love for you, man. You know that.
I feed off the energy with it. Even if it's hatred.
I'll tell you what, though, I love the changes, right? So I made my first appearance. It feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't that far. It wasn't that long ago, like a month and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And I'll be back again in 2 weeks. So it's exciting times. It's exciting times here, and it's exciting times to be part of it. It's exciting. It's
an exciting time to visit our on-demand webcast series. Michael, why should people visit? Like, what problems are we solving with this on-demand?
It's the challenge of schedule, I think, is probably the first problem. But, as I've been thinking about it, and you and I talk about this a lot, and we're actually going to do another webinar today. But when you look at the way a lot of people do webinars traditionally, you feel like, okay, just come on, skip to it, get to it. What's the good stuff here? And what I've always appreciated about the webinars that this network produces is they're much more conversational. There's a lot of good stuff to be able to hear and take a look at. So the on-demand answers the question of, but what if I can't make it live? Yes, you can register and you get the replay, but what if I want to go watch it again? What if I want to send somebody else to it? What if I want to go take notes on it? And I got to tell you, some of the stuff that's up, it's the kind of stuff that I've watched. I went, oh, that's good. And then I've gone back and I've actually sat down and taken notes and listened to parts of it and acted on it. And that's absolutely our goal when we create these things. And that's some of the idea of the on-demand. The live stuff is still going to give everybody the opportunity. You want to ask questions or you want to go deeper on a particular topic with us while we're doing it. Absolutely, that continues. So the on-demand, and we're getting started on that too. It's gonna be offering you too some different perspectives and stuff. So what we have now is some great content from last year, and what I think we're going to be doing with the on-demand program is giving you a couple different perspectives on a topic and helping you make better decisions as you go through it.
I'm excited for today's webcast because you're going to get my kind of updated take on the challenges with logs.
Yeah, and what I got out of it too. I mean, anybody who can use the phrasing, getting off your back foot is exciting to me. And when we were doing some of the prep for it, Taylor, who's going to join us on that, was able to use that, and I like that. But what I always keep looking at is, if you're going to do something in today's environment, are you doing anything that gets me ahead, or am I still constantly reacting to everything? And in today's webinar, we're going to actually talk about some things that we can do with stuff we have in order to get ahead. So it's not always about reacting, but sometimes we can actually try to be proactive. So it's not such the holy grail we feel it is. So it's going to be fun. It'll be a good conversation.
I'd like to introduce our special guest for today. Clayton Fields is a security specialist who's helped clients improve security programs across the world. A thorough understanding of business drivers coupled with the ability to diagnose risk has allowed Clayton to help companies avoid being a headline. Also, with his unique skill set, Clayton has helped executives understand the breakdown that exists between business executives and cybersecurity professionals regarding risk assignment and prioritization that has caused so many newsworthy events. Experiences with incident response and threat hunting have also allowed Clayton to help companies choose unique solutions to mitigate risk. Clayton, welcome to the program today.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having us.
Clayton, I really want to start with when we've spoken in the past. You've talked about patient zero, and I really think that that's a really good entry point into this discussion about Active Directory security and some of the other things that we've talked about surrounding that topic. So what is patient zero? Why do we care? And how does it play into some of the solutions we're going to talk about today?
So it's the initial point of breach. It's where the attacker has developed a way to compromise the organization, defeated security tools, social engineering, numerous practices that allow them to find a beachhead, find an entry point to learn about the organization, learn about where the assets are, learn about where the privileged users are, learn about where the domain administrators are, position themselves for success within the campaign, or just the ability to take the organization for ransom or some basic attack. But more traditionally, your persistent attackers want to own everything. They're not interested in one endpoint. They're interested in every endpoint. They're not interested in one data source. They want every data source. And they've got to start somewhere. Most of them have no pre-knowledge of what an environment looks like. And so they've got to find that entry point to learn all of this information about the organization so they can essentially take it over.
Yeah, and I think traditionally, we've talked about how lateral movement and when it spreads can be really bad. But, once I gain that initial foothold, that's difficult to defend that initial foothold. And one of the things that I always kind of took to heart, especially when I was at a university, and was really hard to protect that initial endpoint, but if I could decrease my time to detection of, as Clayton says, patient zero or the infection as a whole, yeah, they got in, they might have done some stuff, but if I can stop them early on in that attack and cut down my time, that was helpful. And I would see organizations that had breaches, and they'd be like, yeah, they were in there for like 180 days after we did all the forensics. So, Clayton, what you're saying is the initial breach is very tough to stop, but if we can stop it sooner rather than later, that's a valid strategy for enterprises today.
It's the appropriate strategy. You have to understand that your prevention mechanisms, your hygiene, all of the various tactics that you're going to employ is not going to stop every breach. And there's a difference between a breach and a compromise. I think the organization realizes that there's going to be a victim, but the whole company doesn't have to be a victim. So how do we find where these breaches are happening, stop them quickly before the data is compromised, the organization is compromised, the Active Directory, which is the most targeted asset the company has, is compromised, and impossible to clean up. Once an attacker owns your domain controllers, owns your Active Directory, the limits they have in creating persistency are unlimited. There's nothing at that point to stop them from traversing the organization, because Active Directory is vulnerable by design. NTLM, Kerberos, numerous parts of the Active Directory service by design are vulnerable to very basic exploitation. So it used to be lateral movement was network-based, exploitation-based. Attackers don't have time for this. It's too expensive. They're using native tools that companies have. Microsoft says 9 out of 10 companies in the world run Active Directory. So as an attacker, if you know how to exploit Active Directory, it's really kiddie stuff. And once as an attacker, become a user in your environment, you have no idea that the attacker exists. The attacker looks like the administrator, looks like the standard user. There's no privilege escalation. There's no alerts going off in the SIM tool. The attacker is operating within the bounds of the credentials that they've compromised. They're operating in the bounds of the identities that they've compromised. And they're looking for that next identity, and they're moving from identity to identity until they find one that is so privileged and has such access to everything that they can hide within, that they can position themselves for the ultimate exfiltration of whatever they're after.
Now, Clayton, in your opinion, are organizations today too focused on the vulnerability? And in vulnerability, I mean a software vulnerability that can be patched, or those concrete vulnerabilities, and kind of less concerned about, well, that's just the way it works, and we can't change it, and we're just vulnerable by design.
So I think every organization struggles with how to reduce attack surface, and I'm certainly a proponent of reducing attack surface. In fact, at Javelin, we're innovating around reducing the attack surface within the Active Directory, because it's exposed by design at every endpoint. So we're a firm believer in hygiene, firm believer in risk reduction. But at the end of the day, you said it best, Active Directory is vulnerable by design. No hygiene program is perfect. No prevention strategy is bulletproof. They're going to find a way. What we need to focus on in today's world, with as aggressive as some of these persistent threats are, is reducing the time to containment. Containment is a huge problem in this environment today, with all the security vendors mostly focused on whack-a-mole, whack the vulnerability here, whack the malware there. We got to get back to the basics, which is finding the attacker's process, getting in the middle of their process, and putting their process to an end very, very early in that attack.
Now, Clayton, I'm going to stop you there, because when we talk about deception, I firmly believe that when most folks that are doing security in enterprises today, when they hear deception, they think honeypots,
Yep.
They think honeypot virtualization, they think about vendors that are 100% deception is all they do, and it's just an advanced honeypot, and it gets lumped into this category that, yeah, that's interesting, but it doesn't really help me. What can we do to help change the perception of deception?
That's a great question, and I think it involves a significant amount of due diligence by security professionals, not to buy into marketing, not to buy into third-party, quote-unquote, unbiased analyst reports. You really need to dig into the technology, understand what's there, understand what may be different. Specifically at Javelin, we're not interested in honeypotting. We're not interested in there's 36 companies doing that. Our red team has numerous ways around these things. I think you've even spoken to these tactics where we can evade these traps and lures that are being provided. There's also a scale issue with honeypotting, where even with the advanced, quote-unquote, advanced distributed deception vendors, that they have scale issues in getting to every network segment, every endpoint. And deception is an art. Deception is not a product. So if you read The Art of War, deception is an art, and it's about understanding your attacker's process, their methods, their drive, and getting in the middle of that and using their perception against them. Deception is not a tool.
I love that.
So how we are employing deception at Javelin is very, very different. In fact, we don't even talk about deception because, quite frankly, the market is confused about what this is to begin with. They don't look at it as an art. They look at it as a tool. So at Javelin, we focus more on containment, talking about how we can control the attacker's view in their process, use this view against them without honeypots, without servers everywhere, without worrying about network segments and all the topology changes that quote-unquote distributed deception requires as it's been defined by the market. And I think we're doing a fantastic job. We've got some highly skilled partners that have come on board and really embracing what we're doing. Some very high value targets in the business world that are embracing what we're doing. And we continue to get the same feedback, I think, that you shared, that honeypotting is hard to manage. It's hard to scale. And at the end of the day, we want to make this easy. We want to make the security practitioner's job much, much easier, because none of us are getting huge budgets. None of us are doubling staff. We have to do more with less. So we want to make the incident responder's job more simple, give them automation, orchestration within their forensic process, improve memory analysis on patient zero, improve their real-time containment capability. So there's one victim, not dozens of victims, not systemic compromise within the domain that, quite frankly, they lose control of the domain controllers. Your network is owned. There is no amount of cleanup. Most of the organizations we're working with that have had complete domain compromise, they're literally burning it to the ground and starting over again. That is the most expensive task that any company can undertake. And so we want to make this very simple for the defender, stop the attacker from patient zero further into the domain, and give them real-time intelligence. I think that's what's most interesting about getting in the attacker's process. You're creating your own threat intelligence. This is real-time intelligence about who's attacking you, why are they attacking you, what are they after, what are they using against you that you're not blocking. Getting this information in more real time so that the defender can scale. They can teach the prevention tools what to not miss. They can teach the EDR tools new indicators that they need to look for. They have a much better response, much, much faster. And that's really what companies are starting to embrace today. And it doesn't involve putting appliances on every network segment and trying to create fake stuff all over the environment. That's just not scalable for most enterprises from what we're hearing.
Michael, sorry, do you have questions?
Oh, no, yeah. What I'm digging about this, Clayton, is most so first of all, I want to roll back for a second, because you said something in the beginning a couple bits ago that I think is really important, and that there's a distinction between a breach and a compromise. And that we get so wrapped around the axle around breaches, and it's like I always point out to people, but there's still car accidents. The question is, what happens next, right? And that's that compromise. So when you get to this concept of a patient zero, focus on that a little bit more so people can get their head wrapped around it. The value to them with the patient zero is it just finding the problem before it gets bigger, or does that patient zero give them the clues to then know what to look for?
That's a great question. It's all those things, because we want to create cyber resilience within the security program. We want to enable the security program to get stronger, bigger, faster, without more resources, right? None of us are getting more resources. Budgets are not exploding. So that patient zero context that you're getting is very valuable, because that's how you're losing. Now you know you're in the fight. Most companies don't even know they're in the fight. They're getting compromised. Somebody's knocking on the door. Some agency's coming to them. They don't even know that they've been in the fight. So we want to get them in the fight, let them know what they're missing, what they're losing to, improve the security tools that they have, reduce the alert fatigue and the noise that exists in environments today by giving them real-time intelligence about the point of breach. And ultimately, you said it best, these persistent attackers, when you read the threat reports from any security company that publishes them, they all talk about multiple patients. This is not one machine. Right. This is many, many, many machines. And Microsoft, unfortunately, made the assumption you can trust the user and you can trust the endpoint. And so by design, every endpoint in a Microsoft environment is essentially exposing all of the topology and asset information about that environment. It's the attacker's best friend. It's the least talked about problem in the security community. And quite frankly, 90% of the companies in the world have this problem and may not even know it until a red team shows up and says, hey, check out what I can automate, go to lunch and come back and own your domain, and I haven't done any work.
Yeah, and by the way, here's my bill, right? No, you know what I also like about this a lot when you talk about it is it's that exposed by design. I think that's such a clever way to help somebody who's in security go explain it to somebody else. And they go, well, what's the big deal with Active Directory? And you can turn around and say, well, it's exposed by design. Its job isn't to secure information. Its job is to expose it and make everything we're doing better as an organization. And by the way, you guys want that level of collaboration, which creates a different challenge for us as we're trying to do it. And I wanted to amplify that too, because not only did that make sense the first time I heard you say it, Clayton, but then as I've thought about it, what a great way for people to be able to carry that message forward. And I really dig that. Now I got a follow-up question.
Hold on, before you get to that,
then I'll have a follow-up question after that.
It's just resonating in my brain. What Clayton said was that Microsoft Active Directory trusts every user by default. And when you think about it like that, that is a huge problem when we talk about security in modern enterprises today. is that every user is trusted explicitly in Active Directory. Now, we've talked about role-based access control and controlling your data, but when it comes down to it, Clayton pointed out, every user has basically the base level, same level of trust.
Well, and what's crazy about this, and Clayton, it goes to everything we've just been talking about too, is if you want to go look at the human side of it, like how do we hire these bad actors and everything else? Yeah, the answer is because it's not good for business to say, I don't trust you, and I don't trust you, and I don't trust you, but you could work here. It's a great environment, but I don't trust any of you people. So Microsoft, in order to make their stuff work, I mean, by the way, I know it's convenient sometimes to bash these big companies. Think about what Microsoft has done for us in the last 30 years, and you go, wow, that's kind of awesome. By the way, knowing what they know now, would they do parts of it different? Yeah. P.S. Active Directory is exposed by design. So Clayton, here's my follow-up question on Active Directory. I kind of feel like we're at a place in the industry where we say Active Directory security, oh yeah, it's really important, totally got it. And I'm not asking you to call anybody out, but how often are you finding that you're talking to people that actually understand Active Directory security the way that you guys do? Because I appreciate you're trying to make it easier for everybody, but I almost feel sometimes like it's that, yeah, that's totally a problem. Okay, hey, look, blinky lights over there. Like it's a problem, and we don't want to admit that we don't even understand how Active Directory works. We just know that it kind of works. So securing it feels almost like an impossible task. Am I just the simpleton in this, or is it really kind of more complex, and that's why a lot of us are struggling with it?
That's a great question. It is a complex problem because it is exposed by design. You look at NTLM and Kerberos and how you can use pass the hash against these tools to bypass things like two-factor authentication that's been implemented within the domain. It's a very complex problem. So there does need to be some innovation in this space that's going to resolve some of this native exposure that people have. As hard as you make Active Directory, you're still going to have these issues. However, reducing the attack surface makes it so where a more sophisticated attacker has to exist. So you have to reduce the attack surface. You have to understand how to do it. Most of the organizations that I'm running into, quite frankly, the security organization and the Active Directory organization are completely separate. These organizations are not talking to each other. They're not integrating with each other. I think fundamentally Javelin is trying to bring these two groups together and say, hey, Active Directory administrator, security professional, you are a team, right? You both have very much an influence over the security posture of the organization. So I think that's where the innovation also needs to happen. These programs need to come together. People need to share information. Security vendors need to make that easier for people. And these are big focuses as we innovate at Javelin on how we're helping the community.
You know what I love about that is when we look at the security leadership side of stuff, one of the huge challenges in the field today is because you said this earlier too, Clayton, they don't have budgets. You know, you go talk to anybody today and they go, oh, security team has all the budget. No, they don't. And you go talk to the security team and they don't feel like they have the budget either. But this so wrapped up in it is this concept of influence without authority. The security team can't necessarily march into the Active Directory team and tell them how it's going to be. But what I also like that you pointed out is that the security team and the Active Directory team both have a shared interest and both have influence over the security posture. Much easier for people to work together. So anytime there's a solution that says, hey, there's another team that's interested in security and they want to do it better, we can work together. I'm personally a huge fan of that. I think it's a great way in order to look at stuff and to do things differently. So like these are the little things that I'm listening to and picking up. Like Clayton, you've given us ways to talk about it, ways to think about it, reasons to vector in on it, and explain it to other people. And it sounds to me like that's a successful approach.
It does help. I think as professionals learn more about the threat landscape and the types of things that are happening from a very agnostic point of view, from a red team point of view, it helps them understand how business process needs to improve. And this ultimately has to get to the executive level. The executives within companies have to start to realize that infrastructure and security professionals are in the same fight. Because guess what? When it gets really bad, infrastructure's helping clean the mess up. So infrastructure has just as much of a desire to prevent the mess in the first place. It's because they're not getting as many resources these days either. They want to make their jobs easier. There's nothing worse than seeing some kind of ransom attack or some kind of systemic breach where things have to be reimaged, data has to be reconstituted. Infrastructure is a big piece of this. So executives have to start coming together and bringing these organizations hand in hand.
Clayton, along those lines, I wanted to like kind of give a quick example in a story, and then I want to have you talk about containment. When, for example, when I was working for a university, the detection phase sometimes, more often than I would have liked at the time. And we're talking, 17 years ago or so, when all these network worms are running around. The detection phase was the network's kind of slow. And then the network's like down. I can't get to anything, or the internet pipe has been filled up and no one can get to the internet. And that was the detection. And then you're like, okay, well, what's causing that? The containment was me as the analyst with the network team going, I'm pretty sure it's this computer. And I'm pretty sure that it's here.
Let's go over.
And they're like, all right, let's go turn their port off remotely. Now, before we had a managed switch environment, it was let's physically go there
I was gonna say,
and like unplug them from the hub, right? Because it wasn't a switch.
No,
it was a hub.
I remember those days.
But even when it was a switch, let me go turn off the switch. And what would the user do? Go, there's something wrong with my cable, or there's something wrong with my port. Let me plug it into another port. And then you're like, why is the network down again? So, okay, so let's turn off that port. And you're literally playing whack-a-mole with the port. So that was detection and containment before, like, back in the day, like when I walked uphill both ways to my job.
I will admit
right?
there's people right now saying, I wish I had that luxury, Paul.
Yeah.
So,
but now when we look at today, Clayton, you and I previously have talked about containment before. What does containment look like today from Javelin Network's perspective?
That's a great question. So we want to drive containment around the middle of the attacker's process. We don't want to drive containment around whack-a-mole. We look at that as prevention, right? Put the best prevention in place you can, put the best hygiene in place you can, but your containment strategy should not be based on whack-a-mole, because at the end of the day, if the attacker has jumped off that machine onto other machines, you're taking machines offline that are not even relevant anymore. Just because a security tool detects a piece of malware or some script that exists or some fileless injection, it doesn't always tell you how long it's been there, what's been going on since then. Some of the tools will have some historical presence. You can't make assumptions on those tools that the attacker's still on that machine. Chances are they've moved off that machine as fast as possible, because the attacker knows that you're going to figure out the beachhead. They know that eventually the tradecraft is going to be discovered. They often go to great lengths to remove that tradecraft completely, delete it from the endpoint, remove the logs that show that they even existed. And if you do find that, we cannot make the assumption as incident responders that the attacker is still on that endpoint, especially when they can ask Microsoft Active Directory, hey, tell me where the privileged users are, tell me where the service accounts are, move off that machine quickly. The containment needs to be about the movement. It needs to be about the compromise of identities. That's how we know that we're in the fight.
And then does that frustrate the attackers? Is that almost like when we start talking about reducing attack surface and containment, is that also then increasing friction for an attacker, which hopefully either forces an error or gives us a chance to gain an upper hand in the fight? Or how do you look at it differently?
So let's look at this from a professional services perspective. I think Paul is going to appreciate this example. Let's say you hire a red team for 3 weeks and you pay that red team X amount of dollars. They've got X amount of hours to accomplish an objective or give you some picture of how vulnerable that you are. If your security analysis team is stopping them at every turn, at the end of that 3 weeks, how much do you think they've accomplished? Right? Not very much. They haven't gotten to the holy grail that you've put somewhere for them to steal. They haven't found the carrot. They haven't found the nugget. This is the same strategy we want to have with the attacker. We want to make their job so miserable, kick them out of the environment over and over and over again, till the one day they just decide, you know what, there's another victim who's not as prepared for me. I'm going to go pick on somebody else. That is the ultimate prevention strategy. It's to reduce the attacker's motivation, reduce their drive, reduce their return on investment. Attackers have return on investment just like the professional services companies do, just like the defenders do, just like companies with every balance sheet have. They have return on investment. So you hit the nail on the head. Make their life miserable, eject them from the environment over and over and over again, such that they want to leave you alone. If they have to keep recreating tradecraft because you keep discovering the quote-unquote 0-day or unknown or whatever the security community likes to define it as, when you keep uncovering that in near real time and kicking them back out, their life becomes miserable. And they're going to go pick on somebody else.
Well, and you know what I like about that too is we keep looking at how downtrodden we feel in this industry. And if you can start feeling like you're getting that upper hand and you're kicking them out, and it almost, I don't want to say it becomes a game because I don't want to mock any of the stuff we're doing, but gosh, that's so much better than feeling defeated every day. And like I can't get ahead of it. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, and when I talk to red teams and pen testers today, it seems that there's, and this again isn't a scientific study, but the general sense that I get is they say about 1 to maybe 3% of their customers can really frustrate them in that way. And that's good. They're like, we love those tests because it forces us to really either go develop new techniques or tactics to be able to circumvent, whatever is frustrating them, but it's a very small percentage of their customers. And it's one of my goals with our shows to increase that number dramatically so that more of us are frustrating attackers, which is why we bring on partners like Javelin that has those capabilities. Clayton, can you talk about some of the maybe newer features inside the product that kind of speak to being able to frustrate an attacker?
Absolutely. We're focused on automation and orchestration within containment. Our number one objective is to make the incident response process seconds and minutes, not days, weeks, and years. So finding that original victim, containing the compromised processes, looking to contain the accounts that are compromised, helping the company understand through automation, how did this happen? What did they not see? What was not detected? Using incident response methodologies that are specific to the domain environment. I think there's a big misunderstanding in a lot of the security programs I've reviewed where the domain security and network security are two completely different incident response efforts. And so we continue to demonstrate that through POCs and demos to help them understand what the attacker really sees, what their motivation is when they see this data, how they're going to use it, how they can get in the middle of that, actually use that in their favor. I think, Michael said it best. You want to feel like you're winning. You want to feel like you're taking the fight back to them. Javelin is an entire group full of former red teamers and professionals from various, black ops type backgrounds. We want to make sure that we can take that fight back to them in a way that's meaningful. And by understanding their tradecraft deeply, domain security can start to come to the surface, and we can be innovative there. So we've automated much of the memory analysis for the unknown tradecraft. We have not based any detection on previously known intelligence. We want to be able to find the things that nobody's found before, find them faster, contain them faster. So all the innovation is focused at forensics, containment, and automation, making the response team bigger than they can be.
Yeah, and you know what I like about that, Clayton, as I'm listening to it, is it's that concept that I was kind of hitting at before. If you ask most of us that have been doing this for as long as some of us have, hey, can you go help secure Active Directory? Hopefully their answer is no. At least if anybody asks me, my answer is no. But the challenge then is, who understands it well enough to go secure it? Because just attacking it versus understanding the attacker and understanding how to then thwart them or frustrate them or otherwise is really kind of impressive. And what I enjoy in what you just described is it's an opportunity for me or anybody like us to be able to gain that insight and knowledge and give themselves a little breathing room while they get to go focus on some of their higher priority tasks. I always love that kind of approach right now because we desperately need that in our industry. That's awesome.
And good for Javelin and Clayton, right? I have seen small strides in that.
We're seeing a lot more.
I presented at the Sans Hack Fest, and I was talking about I have like 5 of the basic struggles that we have with Active Directory security, and there was a lot of knowledge in the audience about methods in which we can implement to protect against these attacks.
Oh, good.
And it seems to be permeating a little more. But now, again, this was a bunch of experts in this field that that's like they live and breathe. Either they're pen testers or they're so close to the pen testing and dealing with the results of
you got
a pen
burned
test
once or twice and you learned
that they're there to learn about the latest techniques. So it was a very advanced audience. But even in giving that talk over the course of a year, I did notice, I'm like, wow, there's a lot more knowledge, I think, and enthusiasm about getting to the heart of some of these problems and trying to fix them. Of course, as Clayton and I have discussed, like when you've got a network of tens of thousands of hosted in an Active Directory environment, it's next to impossible to calculate every situation where someone could take advantage of Active Directory because of that trust. And I think Clayton hit on some of those points in today's interview. Yeah, that accounting for everything and knowing what all those unknown unknowns are, as Clayton said, is extremely difficult. And why I really like the concept of containment coupled with some deception to be able to get your arms around those attackers. Did I summarize that? Clayton, do you have any follow on to that?
The one thing you just said best is the attackers need one endpoint. In a Microsoft domain, you only need one endpoint because the APIs on the endpoint expose all of the topology information, asset information. The defender has to protect every endpoint. So the veracity of what we're saying right now is completely in the attacker's favor. So you absolutely summarized it well. I think what we have to understand is that hygiene has a place, risk reduction has a place.
Yep.
Active Directory owns every asset the organization has. It is the most risky thing you have deployed in your environment. And when I look at how companies assign risk, they're assigning a very small amount of risk to this problem, and this problem is pervasive across 90% of corporations in the world. So while companies are playing whack-a-mole, trying to protect the endpoint, controlling PowerShell, controlling malware, controlling this or that, attacker finds one way, they circumvent the rest of it, they take over Active Directory, it's game over. They can spend 300 days playing in the environment, finding data, exfiltrating data. They can live for years. We've seen organizations compromised for years. So you summarized that very well. And I think it's something companies have to start reprioritizing, which is recognizing that they're exposed by design on every single endpoint in the Microsoft domain.
Yeah, and you know what I like about this is because I'm always going to look at the problem and the value, because just because you can solve it doesn't mean you should necessarily. But what I've also learned listening to both of you today is, yeah, there's some stuff you can do manually, but gosh, there's a lot to keep up with. And if I can automate that and I can free myself up either to focus on the appropriate response so that breach doesn't become a big compromise, or I don't have to worry about it, I can go focus on other things to do, that's a huge benefit. Yeah. I think sometimes in our industry we don't always evaluate tools as successfully as we should. They're like, oh, I can do that. Yeah, no, you can. Doesn't mean you should. If someone can do it better and automate it and get you better results faster, that frees you up to go focus on something else. That's a good use of your time and your investment in your enterprise.
Well, Clayton, thank you very much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly today. I very much enjoyed the discussion. Javelin-networks.com. Check them out. Go visit them. Say hi to Clayton. I think it's a solution, as we've established today, that we should be evaluating ways to solve this problem. And as Michael just said, at a more grander scale, then sure, there's a lot of things you can do yourself, and don't discount those. But having a more comprehensive solution to this problem is needed in our industry today. So, Clayton, thank you very much.
Thank you for the good work, guys. We'll talk soon.
And with that, we'll take a short break, come back, and talk about the enterprise security news for this week. Stay tuned.